Okay, hello. Today is the 13th of March, 2022, and we'll talk about Karl Friedrich Schinkel, who was born on the 13th of March in 1781. Um, so sometimes I'm a little bit confused, and I will be honest, because sometimes I choose wrongly between the date of birth and the date um, um, of death. Because in the case of someone who died, I talked twice about that architect. I hope I got it right, that he was born on the 13th of March, but we'll see now if I was correct or not. Just a second. Unfortunately, I always have a problem. I don't know if it's my laptop or it's a problem with the Zoom. I don't see I cannot, it's probably with the, yes. Yeah, he was born the 13th of March, thank God. This time I was not wrong. So Karl Friedrich Schinkel, born the 13th of March, 1781, and died on the 9th of October, 1841. So when he died, he was 60. Was a Prussian architect, city planner, and painter, who also designed furniture and stage sets. Schinkel was one of the most prominent architects of Germany and designed both neoclassical and neo-Gothic buildings. His most famous buildings are found in and around Berlin. This is very interesting because, perhaps nothing is as opposite to each other than neoclassical and neo-Gothic, or the classical and the Gothic. But it's true in the case of Karl Friedrich Schinkel. He had a doubleness about him. He was like a, schismatic personality. On one hand, he had dreams, which he painted for the Gothic cathedral. He had a romantic side that made him, passionately attracted towards Gothic architecture. On the other hand, what he built is not Gothic at all. It's, yes, we could say neoclassical, but it's still the neoclassicism of Schinkel is still colored, so to speak, by a romantic sensibility, but is in no way neo-Gothic. A very interesting character. Also, what is not said here, initially he wanted to become a painter. And he did paint all his life. He painted a lot, but he gave up actually the dream of becoming a painter. He arrived at the conclusion that he would never be a great painter. So he dedicated most of his efforts to architecture. So let's see a few pictures with him. This is a drawing. I don't know who did it. I don't know if it's a self-portrait or not. Probably not. A very interesting architect, and yes, revered in Germany, and not only Germany. And also he was revered during the postmodern period at the end of the 20th century. Again and again, here we have an architect who was also a painter. I can write down the names of many architects who were painters and architects. So, again, to be an architect, you do need to have an artistic side. There are a few exceptions, but very rare. Like, for example, Walter Gropius, he didn't paint, and also he didn't draw, but he surrounded himself with painters. After all, the Bauhaus, which was supposed to be in a way, an architecture school, well, he didn't hire any architects at first. He was the only one, but he surrounded himself with painters who taught in a school which was supposed to be, in a certain way, an architecture school. Paul Klee, Vasily Kandinsky, Lionel Heininger, they were all painters. Anyway, back to Karl Friedrich Schinkel. So let's look at some of his paintings, because he painted a lot. Of course, the Gothic cathedral. He has many works depicting. I mean, the Gothic in itself is an idealized, form of architecture. If we talk about architecture, but in his case, is even is overemphasized the idealism of the Gothic. You see, he planted. This is a work of an imagination. Usually the Gothic cathedral was not, on top of a hill, was in the middle of a city. He often brings the cathedral to close to water, like we see here, either sea or the river. He was a dreamer, of course. And, this shows is very possible. He had a longing for God. And the Gothic is the appropriate architecture to express this. But in the 19th century, there was a great neo-Gothic movement, particularly in Great Britain. But he didn't build in that neo-Gothic style, if I am to call it a style. Again, a Gothic cathedral. And again, mentioning again the fact that although he loved the Gothic, he loved to paint it, but he built otherwise. Maybe he couldn't build in this way in Germany. I don't know. Anyway, again, another cathedral. This is the third cathedral that we see being painted by Karl Friedrich Schinkel. And they're all glorious. I myself love the Gothic, because I grew up in the shadow of the Biserica Evangelica, the Gothic cathedral in Sibiu. And it's in me, it's in my soul. So I'm very vibrant to, I sympathize with Karl Friedrich Schinkel's love for the Gothic. But it's not just the Gothic. It's also, for example, in some of his paintings, he shows the morning, which means the beginning of the day. I don't know if he was a mystic, but he did have, longing for content, an emotional, a mental content that extended beyond the measurable. So, the cathedral as the house of God, then the sunrise as the beginning of life, in a way, the life of a day, but symbolically is life in general. He has also, like, beyond the Gothic, he had influences coming from other cultures, like you see here. But these are fantastic. These are imagined architectures. Nobody asked him to, build something like this. Why did he do it? Well, because he had a rich imagination, and he liked to invent things, to create, different architectures, even unfeasible architectures. I mean, unfeasible for the time he lived in. Nobody in the 19th century would build in this way. This was the work of imagination. This cathedral also, at the edge of the city, when we don't know what city, and the rainbow also. So we have all kinds of symbolisms here. We have the white flag there on top of the cathedral, which means peace. Then we have the rainbow, which means, the triumph of the mystery of light and color after the rain. It's a symbolic painting. This was Schinkel, an idealist, of course, and I keep saying we need idealism badly in architecture. And I'm talking about our country. In the absence of that idealism, we become almost irrelevant. You cannot create significantly in the absence of at least some idealism. Anyway, paintings by Karl Friedrich Schinkel. Although he was an architect, here we see no building at all. But we see again the sunrise, you know, the light announcing and the children moving towards kind of, yes, moving towards the sunlight. It's a symbolic painting. Again, the cathedral. This is the fourth cathedral that he painted. Now, we are going to look at some of his most important buildings that he built. Not all of them, but I have here a comprehensive presentation of his most important works. We begin with this truly famous museum in Berlin, the Altes Museum, which is a neoclassical, but I hesitate a little bit to use the word neoclassical. It is classicist. It's a classicist building, but I don't know. It's something about it which makes me a little bit hesitant to call it neoclassical. You know, to incorporate it rigidly into that architectural niche called the neoclassicism. It could be. It's not wrong, but I feel that the romantic sensibility of Karl Friedrich Schinkel, even if, yes, he uses, you know, the regularity of rhythm here, there is, you know, by all canons, we would say this is a classical or classicist building. But I feel there is a romantic side to this, even to this building, that makes things a little bit, in a way, more complicated. Maybe I am influenced in my words, in my thoughts, by the darkness of the columns. When I saw the building, it was exactly like this, you know, and I don't know if the Germans cleaned them up, but if they didn't, I think they did the right thing. You know, these darkened columns, you know, classical columns, if we are to call them so, they are huge, as you can see, the human silhouettes, they are huge. But the fact that they are darkened by war, of course, the Second World War, mainly, and the passage of time makes them, in a way, I don't know, what I say now is probably questionable, less classical, because they are dirty. And we usually associate the classic or the classical with Apollo, with the god of light and you know, clean things, whiteness. Well, they are not white. So, you know, you could say this man is mad. He claims that what dirt is romantic. In a way it is, because dirt implies, you know, disorder in a way. And yeah, it's in a way, yes, dirt is romantic. It's a romantic, you know, entity, or how to call it. Anyway, it's a very important museum in the heart of Berlin. And here on the right is another building by him, also by Karl Friedrich Schinkel. I like this museum. Whatever Wolfprix might say that he hated columns, in my opinion, these columns here are very powerful. And I don't consider them oppressive. Maybe because the building is very long and, you know, yes, the columns are tall, but the height of the building is about the height of the columns. It's rather horizontal, the building. This is a rendering, I think, done by Karl Friedrich Schinkel. Now, it was much more white at that time. So maybe my you know, comments are only partially valid. That's not what he had in mind, Karl Friedrich Schinkel, to, you know, rely on the romanticism of that. The plans. Now the plans are, what can we say, almost predictable, no? I mean, you have a circular big room in the center, and well, on the model of the Pantheon in Rome, and you know, spaces, rooms around it. We are going to see. Look at the section. Of course, this is a small version of the Pantheon. I repeat, I reiterate, Karl Friedrich Schinkel was an architect very admired at the end of the 20th century when postmodernism had a few years of glory. Here we see the model of a building by Mies van der Rohe, which he proposed for Berlin but was not built. Otherwise, of course, the room belongs to Karl Friedrich Schinkel, the Altes Museum. Again, this building behind on the right is also by Schinkel. He designed these two buildings, and these are not the only ones in Berlin. He has others, and we are going to see them. What I don't understand, you know, these columns are darkened probably by war as well. And right now there is this war in Ukraine. You know, it's just unbelievable. I mean, the Russians lost millions of people in the Second World War. Easter is approaching. The Russians are believers. From what I know, Russians do believe in God. So Easter is not far away. And they are waging a deadly war on those they claim are their brothers. They claim Ukrainians are Russian. So they're actually killing Russians. The Russians are killing Russians. That, you know, that is the claim, that Ukrainians are Russians. What's going on? I mean, how do you comprehend this madness, this criminal madness? You know, how to understand it? And we still claim that the human beings are rational? I think we are not at all. And we can expect the most horrible things to happen, really. You know, it's just incredible, absolutely incredible. You know, 2.5 million refugees, women and children and older people displaced. And who knows what will happen there? It's just incredible. I don't comprehend. What does that Putin want? He has the largest country in the world in terms of land. He has Siberia, which will be the country of the future. Because if the climate keeps warming up, obviously Siberia will become the only livable place in the world, or one of the very few. Well, somebody told me in 50 years, that's the place to be in Siberia, if temperatures keep going up. So what does Putin want? He wants even more land? That man should be brought down, really. And I don't know how, but it should be done. And the sooner, the better. And this man he goes to the church, the Orthodox Church, so powerful in Moscow and in Russia. Why doesn't the church say anything? I read that the Patriarch Kirill said that I read that he stated that Putin also wages a war against homosexual parades in Ukraine. That's why you kill people, because you protest against some parades. It's just unbelievable. The corruption at the highest level is immense. These people should be in prison, including the Kirill Patriarch. They should be in prison. And I was actually very happy that apparently the person who talks in the name of the Romanian Orthodox Church had critical statements about Kirill as well. I only hope they were sincere. Anyway, back to Karl Friedrich Schinkel. let's hope it's not going to, I mean, it's already very, very tragic what is happening. In a way, it's inappropriate. Here we talk about beauty and the great architect, but not too far away from here, bombs are dropped, you know, on a country which didn't provoke Russia. I like columns, whatever Volprix might say. I don't like authority in general, and if the column expresses authority, okay, you know, I can understand. Most banks in the world have rows of columns. You know, any institution which wants to evoke order and so-called, you know, justice, you know, palaces of justice in the world, they all have columns in the front. I mean, you know, all the buildings, but you know, it depends. There are columns like here. I have nothing against them. I don't think they are you know, vicious, expressing authority in a crushing and insensitive way. That's because I don't think Karl Friedrich Schinkel was such an architect, you know, to serve authority in a pathetically you know, submissive way. No, no, he was an artist. You saw he painted cathedrals. You know, these columns are. I cannot blame them for being in the service of a authoritarian stance or regime or whatever. Now, in the 19th century and also in the 18th century, there was well, not only then, of course, was love, genuine love for the Greek antiquity. So many, you know, Goethe loved it, Winkelmann loved it, everybody loved the antiquity of Greece. So it was a gesture of reverence. Employing columns was you know, a noble act in the vision of many. I like this museum, yes. I like this museum, but I don't like the New York Stock Exchange, which also uses, you know, so-called classical columns. But there I feel it's something very impure, maybe because I know the function of the building. Here is a museum. I don't know if initially was also a museum. It's possible it was. Well, I don't know where this is. I guess inside the museum, this is a self-portrait, or yeah, it's an artwork representing Karl Friedrich Schinkel, the Altes Museum. Now, another building by him in Berlin, the Schauspielhaus is a theater from 1825. Um, you know, the talent, the sensitivity of an architect, even when he employs so-called classical orders, comes through. That's why this building, although it has a certain rigidity and, you know, but I wouldn't really call it neoclassical in the sense I would other buildings, although it is by all canons, but I don't know what it is. You know, it's something difficult to pin down, you know, to point out as in a convincing way. Who knows? You know, the way he plays the statues here, there is a certain sensitivity at work, despite the, you know, the symmetry and the classical language he used. it's a Prussian architecture. I mean, it's not a Mediterranean architecture, but the architect, in fact, in the in the not the poster, the invitation I sent out, there was a painting of Karl Friedrich Schinkel in a room in Naples, the south of Italy. So, these architects, he was not the only one, but they loved Italy. They loved the south of Italy. They loved the Mediterranean light, the Mediterranean Sea. They longed for the warmth of that culture. And they brought back to Germany, or he brought back to Germany something of that. Well, not completely, because you see here certain things that are rather, so-called German, but there are also other things that make the building not oppressively so-called classical. If I am to ask, if I'm asked now to justify my statement with, I don't know, maybe even these windows, they are regular, they are rhythmical, but you see, they are divided. There is a slight, not a very strong touch of domesticity, although it's a large, public building. But if you look at because he had, and we are going to see a little bit later, he had a domestic side to him, to his architecture. He's not the corporate man that we talk about these days. Yes, he created some big buildings, but a man who, well, you could say the Gothic Cathedral was also a big building. Yes, it was, but it was supposed to be the house of God, and he only painted it. By the way of Russia, he also built in Russia, and we are going to see, and actually he built in a very sensitive way and in a with a small scale building, not a large pompous building. He made this. This was a drawing done, if not by him, during his lifetime, but I think it was rendering done by Schinkel, and it's impeccably drawn. I mean, obviously he knew perspective, and I mean, I don't know, maybe he had a draftsperson in his office. I don't think he worked just alone. But at that time, there were no architecture offices like today with 1,600 employees, like HOK, Helmut Obama, or not Obama, Helmut, I feel like saying Obama, but it's not Obama. He died at 99 just the other day. Obata and Casabaum, HOK, they have 1,600 employees. If in some other reports I read that 1,800 employees. Can you imagine? Of course, not just in one location, but in one architectural firm. Helmut Obata and Casabaum. No, in the 19th century, at the most, I think people had a few employees. That's it. They didn't build skyscrapers. Or did Mr. Putin see this? He's provoking this in the 21st century, if you can believe it. I wonder what will happen during Easter, because it's very possible the war will extend until they reach the time of the Easter. And I wonder if they will continue to bomb and to kill people on Easter. It's very sad. It's very sad and incomprehensible to me. How such people arrive at the position to lead countries, Alte National Gallery. This is the building on the right side of the Altes Museum. I said it twice. So this is another building by Schinkel, and again, I think it's an excellent building. A temple-like, Yes, modeled on the Greek example, but different, of course, from the Greek temples. It's a well assimilated, well digested antiquity. These people traveled. They saw things. They had books. They reflected on the meanings of the of antiquity, and you know, they try to connect with the glory of the Greek architecture. He was not the only one. There was this fascination with Greece, but there was also the fascination in his case, and in Great Britain much more, and in other countries as well. For example, when I lived in Paris, near where I lived, there was a so-called Gothic cathedral, which I like more than Notre Dame. Notre Dame de Paris didn't move me so much, but this cathedral, which was built in the 19th century, neo-Gothic cathedral, to me seemed more genuine than Notre Dame, because Notre Dame was cleaned up for the tourists. It was too whitish, and I don't want to be misunderstood now that I only like things which are not clean. No, but it seemed to more genuine. Strangely, the copy, in a way, the Gothic, so-called Gothic cathedral built in the 19th century. And I want to tell you something else, something paradoxical. Somehow in New York City, all the buildings, and they are not so old, of course, because it's the brave new world, but they appear to be older. Somehow the spirit of history or of the past, I felt it being more present, of course, with exception, but more present in New York City than, let's say, a much older European city. For example, apartment buildings from the end of the 19th century. Maybe in contrast to the new buildings with skyscrapers or whatever, what is old, but actually not so old, because it's, the new world, the brave new world, they appear to be older. And they appear paradoxically to evoke more intense involvement with history. I don't know if I explained well now. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is that this museum built in the 19th century by Karl Friedrich Schinkel could make you feel obliquely and maybe paradoxically more connected with antiquity than the real thing in Greece. For example, I went to the Acropolis and I was near the Parthenon, but I'm not sure I had, maybe you could say I have a degenerate spirit, and that could be possible. I hope not, but that could be possible. But I have, what I want to say, I felt closer to the Greek antiquity in the proximity of the building by Schinkel than in the proximity of the building on the Acropolis. Well, although here I do have to say that there is another temple which is not on the Acropolis, which is from the time of ancient Greece, which I like much more than the Parthenon. But about this maybe some other time. Sometimes what is not very famous has for me a level of being genuine higher. This building is 19th century, so it's 2000 years approximately, newer than what is in Greece. But while I wouldn't call it Greek antiquity, I wouldn't call it a Greek building. The influence comes from ancient Greece, but there is something here. Maybe, I don't know, the hybridity itself that makes me, if not very emotional, but sensitive to what I look at. It's a good building. Maybe because this conjunction between the German, the Prussian spirit and the Greek spirit, and through the lens or the hand, the interpretation of Karl Friedrich Schinkel, who did have a romantic sensibility. So this building is next to the Altes Museum, a larger building that we just saw. Now, this is a small building, which is also in Berlin, which I hesitate to pronounce because I do not know German. Neue Wasche, probably, maybe. Here, again, we see, the Doric columns. A newer version of the Doric column, in a way, a more modern version. Here, I would talk with more ease about neoclassicism to an extent, but only to an extent. And this is a building, a smaller building. I don't know what its function was initially, and we'll see images from the inside. This building was also beloved by the Nazis. There are pictures with soldiers, parading in front of the building. It's very sad again, and I don't understand why war starts to begin with. I don't understand. It's, this president of Russia has everything, the biggest country in the world, riches, power. Why does he want more? Why? This is the interior of this Neue Wasche with a sculpture by Kathy Kulbitz. Very moving, statue or sculpture. It's probably connected with war and the loss of lives. The mother with the dead son, as we can see. Does Mr. Putin know about this sculpture or others like this? It's and I don't understand what his family does or doesn't do. Why don't they? I don't understand. It's how could this be? I'm supposed to talk about Karl Friedrich Schinkel, but I'm continuously having in my mind the terrible things that happen at this very moment. So we talk about idealized, antiquity, about Greece, about culture, about order, about justice, about beauty, about Zeus, about. But the truth of the matter is, I'm afraid Rem Koolhaas was right. Human beings do not learn anything. We do not learn. It doesn't matter. We go to museums, we read books, we have high training. We do not learn. There is a beast in the human being. The Miss van der Rohe competition project for a memorial inside Karl Friedrich Schinkel's Neue Wasche. So you are going to see now the proposal of Miss van der Rohe to create a memorial inside this building by Karl Friedrich Schinkel. This was from 1931. In 1931, Miss was already the director of Bauhaus. As you know, the Bauhaus had 3 directors. The first one was Walter Gropius, who was the founder from 1919 to, I think, 1926. Then followed Hans Meyer, and then Hans Meyer was dethroned because he was considered a communist and so on, and Mies became the leader of the Bauhaus for 3 years. And in 1933, 1934, the Bauhaus dissolved and Mies crossed the ocean, went to the United States. But let's look at this, at his proposal. It's not bad. It's, Mies, different Mies, perhaps a little bit from the one in the United States, but this is a memorial. So, it's about mourning. It has, darker connotations. But this is what is now in the present, the sculpture by Kate Kulwitz, feminine sculptor, a woman, a lady, a very good artist. I mean, what can we do? You know, what can we do to stop this war in Ukraine? Should we send somehow this picture to Mr. Putin? I don't even know why I use the word Mr. It would be probably useless. Useless. It's the same building by Karl Friedrich Schinkel. I mean, you know, also what I don't understand, didn't humanity suffer enough because of COVID for 2 years? 6 million people died. 6 million people died. I don't understand that Russia also had a large number of deaths and it was confronted and is still confronted with the pandemic. That was not enough. It's unbelievable. I mean, was it not enough the suffering because of the pandemic? He had to start a war. In a way, these columns are lying. These columns, which are so well balanced and luminous and, you know, in a way sensitive, and they evoke a sense of order, Apollonian order, they lie. We human beings do not deserve these columns. Whether there were wars in Greece, ancient Greece as well, of course, they killed each other because this is what human beings are so good at. We are able to create classical orders, but we are also able to kill our neighbor or our, friend even. These are the human beings. Let's call them human beings inappropriately. No, I don't understand. The Schinkel Pavilion, Berlin, 1824. So, you know, almost 200 years ago. It's called the Schinkel Pavilion. It's actually a house. But we can see that this man, look at the plan and compare it, for example, with Villa Rotonda or Villa Capra of Palladio, Andrea Palladio, because this one also has four stairs, but in the center is very different. You know, Palladio probably would not have done something like this, to place in the center a staircase. This building is much more modest and domestic than Villa Rotonda or La Rotonda. It's a building which would surprise you somehow when you see it from the outside, because it is in a way very domestic. Here it is, you know, it's a sweet little villa. Again, this is the same architect who painted numerous Gothic cathedrals. But this building is certainly not neo-Gothic. It's certainly not aspiring brand by Henrik Ibsen towards a remote God. No, this is a building on the earth for human beings. This is not for God. It's a good building. I personally like it. But it's, it's a building with oblongs, windows, doors, a little villa. But it's very well, the composition, it's well proportioned. And this balcony, let's see, is it on, yes, it's around the building, or at least on three sides. But it's interesting, you know, it's, I don't know what its function was. and is. This is also an interesting idea, to have oblongs for the doors, the entrance doors. So not only for the windows, but also for the doors. I actually like oblongs, and I think oblongs could be very beneficial in the present, even aesthetically. And like you can use oblongs in creative ways. You shut off noise, you shut off pollution, you shut off questionable lights sometimes. They are very helpful. And you don't need technology for this. You just need some oblongs. That's it. Karl Friedrich Schinkel. No, he was a good architect, and I think his reputation of being one of the best German architects is deserved. You see, this balcony is very it's very discreetly built and designed. It's not oppressive. It's actually it shows a sensitivity. You know, it's very discreet. It's very light. Ornaments, yes, ornaments. This is a rendering for the inside of the building. And as you can see, the built interior is, ornamental as well. Not in an abusive way or excessive way, but there are gestures of ornamental nature. And the color, I don't know if this was the original chromatic scheme of the building with this. Maybe it was. I imagine it was. He was a painter after all. This is his portrait here. I guess it's an art museum, a smaller museum here right now. Well, it's possible these are his creations because it's called the Schinkel Pavilion, and it's possible these pieces of furniture by him, and also his projects for furniture. It's possible, yes. Now another church, Friedrichswerderskirche. This is the closest he came to being neo-Gothic, but still, if you compare what he built here with his paintings, you realize that he was much more exalted in the painting. And this is in a way explainable. It's always easier to be exalted in painting than in, it seems he's not very far away from the Altes Museum, which is here. Now it seems this one became a kind of a museum too, no? Maybe temporarily, I don't know. But, the presence of statues inside the church seems to say that yes, but this happens often in in the Catholic religion. They invite art in very often. Sometimes abstract art, modern art, sure, as opposed to the Orthodox Church, which would not have something like this. I don't know for how long we will continue to stubbornly say no to our own life, our own culture. Karl Friedrich Schinkel. Well, if he lived for another 30 years, like Frank Gehry, he probably would have built much more and many other interesting buildings. This is a chapel built in Russia, the Alexander Nevsky Chapel, which I like, is this building. And yes, it has a, I think he captured something of the spirit of Russian churches, Russian chapels, although this is done by a German. It's nice. Karl Friedrich Schinkel in Russia. The Alexander Nevsky Chapel. Now we arrive at the castle, Schloss's castle, chateau. Yesterday we saw the gardens around the castle, the Chateau of France by André Le Notre, and today we look now at the castle by Karl Friedrich Schinkel. I'm not a great admirer of castles. I find them rather distant, I mean, but he built a castle, of course, and here it is. It does look like a castle, of course, maybe too much so. Now here we cannot talk any longer about the neoclassical or neoclassicism. It's something else here. It's a little bit, I don't know, I find its architecture a little bit problematic. A little bit too sweet, and to make a sweet fortress is paradoxical, is oxymoronic, but that's how to me it looks like a little bit, like a stage design in Hollywood for some film. Sorry, Schinkel, I don't try to diminish in any way your greatness, but maybe, I mean, inside I see some interesting things, but from the outside it looks a little bit again, a sweet fortress, a schloss, a castle. Yeah, we also see some kind of leaning towards the medieval world. They didn't have castles, in ancient Greece. I mean, not castles in the way we know them in Europe. A castle is for a nobleman and the family of a nobleman. It's a function which cannot exist any longer, and it's also useless. Imagine, this castle was built on top of a hill, fortress-like, being protected or easily being protected or having the capacity to be protected. But what do you do today when a bomber, Russian or otherwise, would fly above the poor schloss, the poor castle? Is we look at the buildings at the bottom and look at the castle. Now in ancient times, or not ancient, in older times, here was the nobleman, and then less fortunate people lived at the bottom. But now they are both immensely fragile. The castle is doesn't matter how imposing it looks. Again, with modern technology, we can transform this into ashes in a matter of seconds. So Nikolai Church in Potsdam, also in Germany. This is again, this is not what he depicted in his paintings, the Gothicist cathedrals. But it's interesting because yes, he has elements of neoclassicism, but also these corners with these little, these pointing little roofs. It's something here a little bit hybrid. So it's not, that's why I wouldn't call him a neoclassical architect. No. He interpreted, he changed, there was a metamorphosis of all the styles that he adapted according to his sensitivity. He likes symmetry, obviously. Even here we see four turrets in the corner of the building. The center is center, all right. It's, this is, almost what is happening at the White House in Washington. It's impressive and big. So this is in Potsdam. Now we have we can take a look at the interior. Sorry, I wish I had more pictures of it with it, but I don't. Okay, now another church in Berlin. Now, this man built a lot in Berlin. Now, yes, this one, but you see, it's called a church, but it's more temple-like. Its architecture is more temple-like. So you wonder, in what way the Gothic loving Karl Friedrich Schinkel understood the sacred. Because you cannot say that this is a Christian church. It's more temple-like. And it's even more surprising when you consider his painted work with those majestic and exalted Gothic cathedral or Gothicist cathedrals. Interesting man, interesting architecture. Again, the effects of war, probably, but the interior, they kept well, I guess the exterior was, made acceptable somehow, and the interior was left, at least in this picture, as it was affected by the deadly Second World War. Again, why is, anyway, I read that actually Biden told Putin, you don't have a soul. And Putin replied, apparently, we understand each other. I actually find the reply of Putin, if indeed this was his reply, rather subtle, well, cynically subtle, and in a way with a certain level of intelligence. Indirectly he told Biden, you are also soulless. I keep coming back to this because I cannot forget what is happening not far away from where we are. I just cannot forget. These are, modern sculptures by important Serbian uh, artist Abramovich. Abramovich. So art is brought in, and I think the Catholic Church, the Western Church, is doing the correct thing. Somehow is rediscovering that equation, that initial connection between art and religion, which was expressed in the etymology, the oldest etymology of the word art that I found, or the oldest definition of art. Art equals bridge equals God. And both Rodin, I kept saying this, sorry if one of you or several, well, one of you heard me about this before, but both Ingmar Bergman and Auguste Rodin said the same thing. At the beginning, art and religion were one, because art was a form of worship. That was the raison d'etre of art. And in later times, in modern times, I don't know when exactly, maybe after the Renaissance, gradually art divorced itself from religion. And both Rodin, a great sculptor, and Ingmar Bergman, a great film director, they both said the same thing. When religion and art became divorced from each other, they both died. And maybe the Western Church, consciously or unconsciously, they, by bringing art back into the church and contemporary art, maybe it tries to create again that connection that initially was the very root of both. Bring together art and architecture, and art and religion. And they do it courageously, avant-garde theater, avant-garde art, like here. Bravo to them. I wish something like this would happen in our country as well, but there are no signs at all in that direction. In our case, art and religion are violently divorced, because the art, that the so-called art that the churches in our country display, is not the art of our time. No, it's just a dogmatization of art, and thus it is not art, because dogmatized art is not art. These people are creating here in accordance with our time. And what I see here, to me, is very impressive. It doesn't matter the building is, unadorned or, affected by time. I find it very moving. Now, the Nazareth Church in Berlin, another, well, this one looks more like a church, but it's cubistic, and it's has a level of austerity. If he didn't have this rose window here and these doors like this, I mean, he could have this could have been easily transformed into a modern church, an interpretation. It's still very simple and rather austere. And the reference to the antique ancient temple is still here. I think Schinkel, despite being an architect of the 19th century, also announced, indirectly and maybe subtly, or maybe not stridently, modernity. I mean, this building, it's in its simplicity, has a certain level of modernity. Now, the Charlottenhof Palace in Potsdam, this is not a schloss, it's not a castle, but a palace. It was refurbished, it's cleaned up. Schinkel again. Karl Friedrich Schinkel. Now, an interesting work, a tent room. I don't know for whom it was built or constructed. It's a good work in my opinion, because in its fragility, being a tent, a different kind of sensibility is at work here. Now, I don't know if he designed also the fabrics, but well, it's a room, it's a tent, but it's also a room, you see, with a wooden floor and with a window. If it was not built for a king or, you know, but I imagine it was built for, you know, an elite, you know, high-ranking official, if not the king himself and the queen. I don't know what they had at that time in the, you know, first half of the 19th century. I like it because it's this mixture, and I think there are suggestions here for a possible architecture which combines the, you know, the solidity of built room or built house with the fragility and the temporalness of textile work. And you know, it's something to reflect on. If you could make an architecture which is both stable and unstable, or permanent and temporary, you know, combine the solid aspects of architecture with a certain level of fragility, like a tent has. But this is a large tent, of course. But I like it, you know. It's also an intersection in a way of two cultures, you know, the European Western culture and, you know, maybe the Arab culture. You know, that the tent is, I think, a viable, actually, solution, perhaps even for at times of when we are, you know, confronted with sustainability problems and so on. I would consider the tent and study it, and who knows, in maybe some interesting architectures could emerge from the inspiration coming from the tent. Now I'll end the presentation showing, I don't know, I usually show the drawings at first, at the beginning, but here I have them towards the end. I might show also some furniture, I forgot, but let's look at his renderings. Because he was a painter, he was a draftsperson, he was an artist, he also drew a lot, and his renderings are, you know, impeccable. I mean, you know, imagine how much work was put into this rendering. I don't know if he did it alone or he had some, you know, people helping him, but, you know, just to render one of those statues, forget about the whole ambiance and the whole room. And these are not for specific projects, I imagine. They are just idealized, you know, visions, so to speak. They idealized, you know, versions of possible architectures that he imagined. Now, maybe this was done, although it's different from what we saw at the Altes Museum, but who knows? Maybe, you know, a variation on that theme. Again and again, the drawing has importance in architecture, even if you do not build, but you can express yourself through a project, through a drawing, even if it's not a project for a specific task, for a specific, you know, space or place. You can still express what you believe in, what you feel architecture should be and could be through drawings. You don't need a client for this. Like this here, you know, nobody commissioned him, you know, this kind of idealized, you know, architectural setting clearly influenced by ancient Greece. No, he did it because he loved architecture and he loved to dream. And those who in the name of so-called reality kill the vision of the architect or arrest it, do a terrible disservice to architecture. We should allow and encourage any architect to express his or her visions as courageously as possible. You know, I mean, again, this is a major architect in Germany in the 19th century who built a lot, and we saw buildings built by him, who also expressed himself, graphically in what some might call fantasies. But these fantasies are important. They are important for expressing, the visions of the architect. So he did it through paintings of, Gothic or neo-Gothic cathedrals. He also did it through architectural projects which were not destined to be built. This is a drawing he did for, Campidoglio in Rome. We know here the square where Michelangelo worked. I guess it's a drawing he did upon visiting Rome. Then this is a stage design. He worked also for the theater, other renderings, in this case, perhaps for, a building which was supposed to be built, and it was built actually, maybe not quite like this. The building that was built, and we saw it with a sculpture by Kate Kulwitz at the interior. A very rich life, no? So this man manifested his longings, his aspirations, his dreams, his talent through drawings, through paintings, through building. This is an architect, and this is what an architect is supposed to do. Not to be the slave of Homo economicus, not to become a businessman. Architecture is one thing, and business is another. And we should understand this. If this man was a businessman, he would not have drawn what we look at now. No. What businessman would spend here? I mean, again, just to render this column, you will need some time. Even if you are very rigorous German architect, you need some time, not to speak about drawing, painting every leaf of the trees and the sculptures. He worked without doubt here, a long time just for this rendering, and he has many. He loved architecture, he loved art. What can you do? This is what an architect is supposed to do. To love art and architecture, or architecture and art, and above all, life. Yes. And nature, of course, nature. This is rather strange. What is this? This just the top of a building planted, springing directly from the earth. These are, imaginings of Karl Friedrich Schinkel, like this rendering as well, or this, drawing. It makes me think almost a little bit of, although Levi-Strauss was a very different kind of, architect in his imaginings, but he also, I mean, this was not built, was not maybe even buildable. It was him dreaming about architecture, incorporating inside the huge rocky mountain, the work of man. And why did he do it? Because he had architectural visions, domestic or not so domestic, ambitious or not so ambitious. We saw the tent room that was built. Here is a rendering of it, and he drew everything, and is actually almost identical with what was built. I end this presentation, I think, with this, the stage design for the Magic Flute by Mozart, the Hall of Stars in the Palace of the Queen of the Night, Act 1, Scene 6, from 1847 to 1849. So, two important artists, we can call Mozart an artist too, although he was a composer, a musician. And this is the, you know, this is the stage design for the Magic Flute by Mozart, done by Karl Friedrich Schinkel. And in my opinion, despite the fact that it is, you know, rather, well, figurative in a way, at least there is the human silhouette there. But I think the stage design, if you do it, if it was done these days, it will still be impressive. You know, because the vastness of the sky, of the heavens, of cosmos is evoked very well here, and the human being is just you know, reduced to a minimum. So why did I say what I said? Because I think the modernity of Karl Friedrich Schinkel is an aspect which we shouldn't ignore. Art, as Charles Baudelaire said, has two halves. One half speaks about what is permanent, about the eternal, the immutable, and the other half speaks about the transitory, the ephemeral, the temporary. So art, and I think Charles Baudelaire was right, art has both halves, and you need both. So the permanent side of the work of Karl Friedrich Schinkel is relevant to us as well, 200 years later, or almost 200 years later. So let's wish him happy birthday, Mr. Schinkel. Thank you.